My relationship with reading and writing has always been active throughout my life, but they haven't always been active at the same time. Currently, however, I'm married to both reading and writing. Anyway, I'm going to separate my phases of reading into 4 chunks.
I got into reading through my parents, who were both avid readers, though that was mostly before I was born. Still, they pushed me and my brother to read always from a young age.
Okay, so every night at bedtime, that was our special time. Like with your brother, he used to be quite jealous, so I'd have to lay with him to read him his story he picked out, and then lay with you to read you your story you picked out. And you guys would both pick out like chapter freaking books.
I also remember really being into superheroes as a young fella. I remember me and my brother and my dad, we'd go to the library, Parkersburg Library, with a duffel bag, and we'd commit mass heists. That's the graphic novel section, because those are the stories that I was wanting to read at the time. And some of them were above my level, so my dad would help me read them, and he'd read them to me and my brother. And like that was a way that I found that writing could, be about my passions, and I could learn more about them through reading. That's pretty cool. The next huge discovery in my reading journey was finding Roald Dahl. And how I found him was my dad read me Fantastic Mr. Fox when I was a pretty young fella, and we watched the movie like a bunch of times. And I sought out his books in whatever library I had access to. And I even actually ended up watching a bunch of Wes Anderson movies because I had heard my brother and my dad talking about them a lot. And what made this point in my reading so distinct was that I loved the stories that these people were telling, but I really loved the way they were telling them and the style. I really fell in love with their voices. And this leads me to my next and most shitty phase. In 6th grade, I carried on my childhood legacy and I continued reading, both in the classroom and further. In 7th grade, I moved and started attending a new middle school. I was nervous as hell about it because, I didn't know anybody in the area yet, and this made it kind of hard for me to read or focus on school in general. But there were a few books that I ended up squeezing in, and here they are. The Giver by Lois Lowry. 2, S.E. Hinton's The Outsiders. 3, Breakfast of Champions by Kurt Vonnegut. Adding on a little bit to my Breakfast of Champions attempt, I think this was a milestone in my reading because I chose the book knowing it was a little bit above my level, but I'd heard my brother and my dad talk about Vonnegut a lot, and I wanted to join in on those conversations. And once I read the book, I did join in those conversations, and I quickly realized I did not really understand completely what I was reading. But I still really enjoyed Vonnegut's humor and his style of writing. I actually found I loved it, but I knew that I might need to wait a little bit before I returned to that. This year sucked! And I don't really recall reading much outside of one nonfiction book about the assassination of JFK. This one right here. This takes us to high school. Sophomore year was a significant period of growth in my literacy journey. My aunt gave my family her old piano, and I began to learn that. Soon after, I started writing songs. I found a way to be creative and a way for me to express the way I was feeling. I always loved making things growing up, and now music had become the thing that I could scratch that itch again with. And it was something I could show people and be proud of. And I've still been writing songs and poems ever since. Around the same time I got into playing music, I got back into watching movies, and I really became obsessed this time. There was a point where I remember I'd come home from school and watch 2 movies every night. Just because I kind of felt like I had to crunch in all this movie knowledge in a short amount of time. I also started journaling around this time. I'd document all the movies I was watching, and I'd take notes on them, and I'd rate them. And that led me to just kind of doing most of my writing and dumping of my thoughts into journals. And that's where I'd write all my songs and try to write shitty screenplays and just whatever else. And it was also during the interview with my mom I found out I'd actually started journaling when I was a kid.
You started journaling, like writing stuff in notebooks. I'm gonna say probably between 7 and 9. Yeah, you were kind of writing down your thoughts. You know what I mean? That was your way to get your feelings out.
As I continued through high school while finding my taste for music and movies, I returned to reading again. I was really interested in reading what my favorite artists were influenced by, or just, what they loved. The Beatniks came up a lot, so I figured I had to give them a shot. I read a few of their books. I read Jack Kerouac's On the Road, a few short stories by William S. Burroughs, and Naked Lunch. And I tried to read Allen Ginsberg, but I had trouble engaging with him. And after that, I returned to Vonnegut again, and I really fell in love with him this time. Almost the same way I did with Roald Dahl when I was a kid. I also read my favorite book around this time, The Road by Cormac McCarthy. And a lot of this reading had to do with my AP Lit teacher, Miss Kiss. She gave us independence over what we read in class and for our assignments. She helped me become a much better reader. It was in this class that I was introduced to critical theory and the lenses we talk about a lot in our class. And more broadly, just how to engage in literary analysis. I hadn't really been taught it as explicitly as she did. I was really proud of my progress, and at this time I started developing a feeling that I kind of wanted to share what happened to me and my growth with reading and writing with others. And that's when I decided that I wanted to become a teacher. This leads us to the final phase. I'm now pursuing a degree in English and secondary education. I'm reading and writing all the time and playing music. And this is the end. Thank you for watching.